Do you ever have that moment where you want to talk to someone, you even know it would probably be good for you to say something, but your whole body suddenly acts like this is a life or death event? Your brain starts scanning for the perfect opening line, your chest gets tight, you overthink your face, your tone, your timing, where to look, when to speak, whether you're interrupting, whether you'll sound weird, whether they already think you're weird. And then the moment passes. Someone else starts talking. They walk away. Or worse, you stand there in silence, pretending you never wanted to say something in the first place. A lot of people think awkwardness means they're bad at conversation. It usually doesn't. Most of the time, awkwardness is just what happens when you care, you hesitate, and then you start trying to control every second of human interaction. And that matters, because if you've been telling yourself, I'm just awkward, you may be turning a temporary feeling into an identity. A lot of adults live with this quietly. At work, they rehearse what to say before speaking up in a meeting. At the coffee shop, they think of something friendly to say to the barista, then decide it's too late. At the gym, they want to introduce themselves to someone they see every week, but after months of eye contact and silence, it starts feeling impossible. On a date, they want to ask a real question, but instead they say something safe and generic because they're afraid of sounding too eager. At a party, they check their phone because it gives them something to do with their hands. In the office kitchen, they hear someone they'd actually like to know better, but by the time they come up with a sentence, the other person is already back at their desk. These moments look small from the outside, but inside, they feel huge. They shape who you connect with, how confident you feel, and how much of your real personality people ever get to see. And here's the strange part. Starting a conversation is usually much harder in your mind than it is in real life. The dread before it is often worse than the conversation itself. That's why this topic matters so much, because if you can learn how to start a conversation without feeling awkward, you don't just get better at talking, you get your life back in all these small everyday moments. You stop missing chances. You stop waiting for other people to do all the social work. You become easier to know, easier to trust, easier to remember. And no, that does not mean becoming loud, extroverted, or fake. It means becoming more comfortable making contact. That's it. That one skill changes a lot. Most people assume good conversational starters are about having clever things to say. They think the confident person is the one with the perfect line, the funniest opener, the smoothest energy. But that is not what actually makes conversations start well. What makes conversations start well is emotional safety. People open up when the moment feels easy, human, and low pressure. That means the goal is not to impress. The goal is to make it easy for both people to step into a moment together. That's a completely different mindset. If you try to perform, you get stiff. If you try to connect, you get natural. Think about how awkwardness usually begins. It starts before you even speak. You see someone. Maybe it's a coworker you don't know well, someone standing near you before a meeting begins, a neighbor checking the mail, someone at your friend's birthday dinner, or a person you'd like to talk to after a class or event. The moment appears. Then your brain asks 100 questions in half a second. What should I say? Do they want to talk? What if they shut me down? What if I bother them? What if it comes out wrong? What if I say hi and then have nothing else? What if there's silence? What if I look desperate? And now you're no longer in the moment. You're in your own head, trying to predict and control an interaction that has not even started yet. That mental pressure is what creates the weird energy. Not you, the pressure. This is why so many people say things like, I don't know how to start a conversation, when what they really mean is, I don't know how to handle the uncertainty that comes right before a conversation. That is a very different problem. Because if the real problem were lack of words, this would be easy. You already know lots of words. The problem is that the moment feels exposed. Starting a conversation is a tiny social risk. You're offering a little bid for connection, and there is no guarantee how the other person will respond. Human beings feel that risk very strongly, especially if you've ever been ignored, brushed off, misunderstood, or made to feel like you were too much or not enough. Your nervous system remembers that. So now a basic social moment feels heavier than it should. That doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It means your brain is doing what brains do. It's trying to protect you from social discomfort. The problem is that it often overprotects you. It treats a normal moment like danger. And when that happens, you get one of two awkward patterns. The first pattern is silence. You say nothing because you wait too long for confidence to arrive. The second pattern is forced effort. You speak, but because you're so focused on getting it right, your energy becomes tight, rushed, or unnatural. That's when people say too much too fast, ask questions that feel interview-like, laugh nervously, over-explain, or suddenly abandon the interaction because they feel themselves getting weird. None of that means you're socially broken. It means you are trying too hard to avoid discomfort. Here's one of the biggest shifts that helps. Stop thinking of starting a conversation as creating a performance. Start thinking of it as creating a doorway. That's all you're doing. You are not responsible for carrying the entire interaction on your back. You are not required to be fascinating. You are not trying to make the next 10 minutes happen instantly. You are simply opening the door. Sometimes the other person walks through it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they step halfway through, and that's fine too. But when you treat the opening like it has to prove your charm, confidence, intelligence, humor, and value all at once, of course it feels overwhelming. A much better way to think about conversation starters is this. Your first sentence only has to do one job. It has to make the next sentence easier. That's it. If your first line helps the moment move from silence to shared attention, it worked. Even if it wasn't brilliant, even if it was simple, especially if it was simple, because simple feels normal, and normal is powerful. Let's make this real. Say you get to work a little early and you're in the break room with someone from another department. A lot of people freeze because they think they need a fresh, original topic. You don't. You can use the environment. You can use timing. You can use shared experience. You can say, looks like everybody had the same idea this morning. Or, that coffee smells a lot better than the one I made at home. Or, I feel like this week's moving weirdly slow. None of that is genius. That's the point. It's normal. It gives the other person something easy to respond to. They can agree, joke, add something, or not. But the pressure is low. The same thing works almost everywhere. If you're waiting for a meeting to start, you can say, have you been in one of these before? If you're at a networking event and both of you are standing near the food table pretending not to be awkward, you can say, I never know whether to act like I belong at events like this or just go straight for the snacks. That kind of line works because it tells the truth in a light way. It's relatable. It lets the other person relax because you're not pretending to be perfect. Confidence is not acting smooth. Confidence is letting the moment be human. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They think awkwardness comes from saying the wrong thing. Usually, awkwardness comes from making the moment too heavy. For example, you see someone you kind of know, and instead of starting small, your brain wants a perfect topic with a big payoff. So you come in with way too much energy or way too much seriousness. You ask something intense too fast. You explain too much. You force a joke. You fill silence immediately because you think silence means failure. But brief silence is not failure. It's just space. Mature conversational energy can handle a little space without panicking.
Another thing that helps a lot is realizing that people are much less focused on your performance than you think. They are focused on themselves, on whether they seem weird, whether they're in a rush, whether they look okay, whether they said the right thing, whether they should be more social, whether they have enough energy for this. In other words, the person you are worried about is probably having their own version of the same internal conversation. This is why people often appreciate the one who gently opens the moment, not because the opening was magical, but because somebody made the interaction easier. This brings us to one of the best rules for starting conversations. Start with what is already true. Don't search your mind for an impressive topic. Use what is present, the place, the timing, the shared event, the visible situation, the thing both of you are experiencing. If you're in line somewhere, there's the line. If you're at a dog park, there are the dogs. If you're in a class, there's the class. If you're walking into a building with someone at the same time, there's the moment. Human conversation does not need to begin with originality. It usually begins with reality. If you want a simple framework, remember this. Notice, offer, invite. First, notice something real. Second, offer a light comment. Third, invite a response without pressure. For example, you're at a bookstore and someone is looking at the same section. You notice the shared interest. You offer, "I always come over here telling myself I'm just browsing." Then you invite naturally by leaving room for them to answer or smile or ignore it. You're not demanding, you're not chasing, you're opening. Or you're at work before a presentation. You notice the energy in the room. You offer, "Everybody gets extra quiet right before one of these." That gives people a natural entry point. Or you're waiting for food at a casual place and the service is slow. You notice it. You offer, "This order feels like it's becoming a long-term commitment." Again, low pressure, easy to respond to. There's a deeper reason this works. When people feel awkward, they often become self-focused. They monitor themselves. How am I coming across? What do I look like? What should I say next? That self-monitoring is exhausting and unnatural. The moment you notice something outside yourself and speak from the shared environment, you reduce that internal pressure. You become more present. Presence always feels better than performance. Let's talk about what to say when you genuinely don't know the person at all. This is where people get especially nervous because there's no existing relationship to lean on. Maybe you're at a friend's gathering and there's someone standing near you. Maybe you're in a co-working space. Maybe you're in a class, a volunteer event, a birthday dinner, a wedding reception, a neighborhood thing, or even just stuck beside someone at a long community meeting. In these moments, people often think they need to approach it correctly. That word alone makes it sound bigger than it is. You are not approaching, you are beginning a normal human exchange. A really reliable way to do that is to use context plus curiosity. How do you know Jamie? Have you been coming here long? What brought you to this event? Do you work around here? Have you tried this place before? These work not because they're sophisticated, but because they match the moment. They also give the other person room to answer at different levels. They can give a short answer if they want to keep it light. They can give a longer answer if they're open. Your job is not to force depth immediately. Your job is to create ease.
What does not work as well is treating a stranger like an interview subject. One question after another with no warmth, no reaction, no sharing, no rhythm. That's when conversations feel dry. So if they answer, respond like a person, not a host reading prompts. If they say, "I know Jamie from work," don't jump straight to the next question like, "Oh, what do you do?" Instead, let yourself react. That makes sense. Jamie seems like the kind of person who knows everybody through work somehow. Or, "Okay, so you've probably heard all the stories already." Then maybe ask something else. Conversation breathes better when it has reaction, not just extraction. This is where a lot of socially anxious people accidentally make things harder for themselves. They think the safest thing is to ask the other person questions so they don't have to reveal anything. But if you only ask and never offer small pieces of yourself, the interaction can feel one-sided. You don't have to overshare, just add little pieces of your own experience. If someone says, "I just moved here a few months ago," you can say, "That's a big adjustment. I've been here longer, but honestly, there are still places I haven't figured out." Now it's mutual. Mutuality reduces awkwardness because it feels like two people building something together instead of one person being examined.
Another powerful shift is learning to respect the smallness of small talk. A lot of people secretly hate starting conversations because they think small talk is fake. But small talk is not fake. Bad small talk feels fake. Good small talk is just the beginning stage of trust. It's the social version of knocking before entering. You don't start with your deepest thoughts because the relationship hasn't earned that yet. You start light because light is respectful. Then, if the moment opens, you can go deeper. But if you skip the warm-up and try to jump into meaning too fast, people often pull back, not because they dislike you, but because the pacing feels off. This matters a lot in American social culture, especially in workplaces and casual public settings. People often value friendliness that doesn't feel invasive. They like ease, they like low pressure, they like a little humor, a little warmth, a little self-awareness. They often do not want to feel cornered into a deep conversation when they are just trying to get through their day. Once you understand that, conversation gets easier because your goal stops being make this moment meaningful right now and becomes make this moment comfortable and real. Let's talk about the fear of having nothing to say next, because that fear shuts down conversations more than almost anything else. A lot of people are not afraid of the first line. They are afraid of the second, third, and fourth line. They think, okay, maybe I can say hi, but then what? That question creates a lot of paralysis. Here's what helps. You don't need a whole conversation plan. You just need one thread to pull. Most conversations grow through threads, not speeches. A thread can be a detail the person mentioned, a feeling they showed, a choice they made, a shared experience, or a little story opening. For example, if someone says, "Yeah, traffic was brutal this morning," there are several threads. You can ask, "Do you have a long commute?" You can react, "I swear, traffic has its own personality depending on the day." You can relate, "That was me yesterday, and it put me in a bad mood before 9 a.m. If someone says, "I've got family coming into town this weekend," the thread could be family, weekend plans, hosting stress, or the city itself. If someone says, "I'm trying to get back into working out," the thread could be consistency, motivation, gym culture, or how hard it is to restart habits. You do not need cleverness, you need attention. Good conversation starters are not separate from good listening. In fact, one reason confident people seem more natural is that they do less mental scrambling and more noticing. They hear one useful detail and stay with it. Awkward people often assume they need to create momentum by inventing new topics quickly. That usually makes things more random. If you want flow, stay with what's already there a little longer. Let one thing lead to another.
There's also something important about pace. When people are nervous, they either speak too quickly or they rush the transition between topics because they fear dead air. But slow, calm pacing is part of what makes an interaction feel grounded. You can say a simple sentence and then let it land. You can ask a question and let the person think. You can smile without immediately filling the next second. The need to erase every pause is one of the fastest ways to create awkwardness, because when you do that, the interaction starts feeling like a problem you're trying to solve instead of a moment you're sharing. Let's look at a few common situations and what actually works. Imagine you're early to a work meeting and only one other person is there. A lot of people stare at their laptop because they don't want to force conversation. That's understandable. But if you want to be better at starting naturally, this is actually a great opportunity because the stakes are low. You could say, "I feel like being early to meetings is either very responsible or deeply unnecessary." That works because it's lightly self-aware and easy to respond to. Or, "How's your week going so far?" can work if your tone is warm and not too formal. Or, "Have you worked on this kind of project before?" Works because it's relevant. What doesn't work as well is coming in too aggressively with big personal questions, or staying so stiff that the question feels like HR paperwork. Now imagine you're at a friends get-together and you know almost nobody. This is where lots of people cling to the person they came with, which is natural, but it also keeps them from practicing.
If you find yourself standing near someone else who is also not actively talking, that is one of the best times to begin. You can say, "How do you know them?" That line works because everybody expects it in that setting. Or, "I feel like at every gathering there's a 5-minute period where everybody's pretending to be less awkward than they are." That one works if your delivery is light and friendly. It creates instant shared humanity. And if they laugh, great. If they say, "Exactly," now you're in a real moment, not a performance. Imagine you want to talk to someone at the gym, but you don't want to be intrusive. This is where timing and brevity matter. Don't interrupt someone in the middle of a set or with headphones clearly on and intense focus. But if the timing is natural, like at the water fountain, stretching area, or front desk, something simple like, "Do you know if this area is usually busy around this time?" Or, "Have you taken any classes here?" is much better than trying to force charm. It gives them a clear, safe way to respond. If the conversation grows, great. If not, you were normal and respectful. Imagine you're interested in someone and the awkwardness feels 10 times stronger because attraction raises the stakes in your head. This is where a lot of people become unnatural because they stop trying to connect and start trying to impress. They think they need a line that signals confidence, but most adults can feel when someone is trying too hard. Calm curiosity lands better than performance. If you're already in a shared setting, use the setting. If you're at a friend's party, "How do you know everyone here?" is better than something overly polished. If you're in line, "This line's long enough that we should probably know each other by now," can work if it matches your natural style. But the real secret is less about the line and more about your energy. Easy, unforced, not chasing a result in the first 10 seconds. Now let's talk about what makes a conversation feel awkward after it starts, because this is where many people decide they failed even when they didn't. Sometimes you say something simple and the other person gives a short answer. Maybe they're distracted, maybe they're shy, maybe they're tired, maybe they didn't hear you clearly, maybe they are not that open in that moment. Your nervous system may instantly interpret that as rejection and flood you with embarrassment. But a short response is not always rejection. It may just mean the conversation needs one more gentle beat before it opens. Or it may mean this one isn't meant to go further. Both are okay.
For example, you say, "How's your week going?" And they say, "Busy." That can feel like a dead end if you're already insecure, but it doesn't have to be. You can say, "Yeah, same. It feels like everybody's trying to fit 10 days into 5. That might open them up. Or you can let it go gracefully. Not every opening becomes a full conversation. That is not failure. It's emotional maturity to know the difference between trying once and forcing. This is a huge point, so let's slow down on it. One reason starting conversations feels so scary is that people quietly assume every attempt has to succeed. But success should not mean the conversation became amazing. Success should mean I opened the moment clearly and calmly. That's a skill you control. Whether the other person has energy, interest, time, or social ability in that exact moment is not fully in your control. When you judge yourself based on the whole outcome, you become afraid to begin. When you judge yourself based on whether you showed up well, you become freer. Most people also underestimate how much tone matters. You can say a very ordinary sentence in a way that feels warm, or in a way that feels flat, tense, apologetic, or overly intense. A strong opener is not only about words, it's about relaxed delivery, a little warmth in your voice, a pace that doesn't sound rushed, eye contact that is present but not staring, and maybe most important, not sounding like you're asking for permission to exist. So instead of, sorry, I don't know, I was gonna ask, try letting your sentence be simple and complete. Have you been here before? How do you know them? Looks like everybody needed coffee today. Clean, light, done. Now, here's something that surprises a lot of people. Being slightly honest about awkwardness can actually reduce awkwardness when you use it well. Not all the time, and not in a self-defeating way, but sometimes naming the human truth of the moment makes everyone relax. For example, I always forget how weird the first 5 minutes of an event feel. Or, I never know whether to start conversations at these things or just stand near the snacks and hope for the best. That kind of line works because it's socially intelligent. It's not dumping insecurity on the other person, it's lightly acknowledging the shared reality. That can be very charming because it feels real. What doesn't work is turning your insecurity into the topic in a heavy way. I'm so awkward. I'm bad at this. Sorry, I'm weird. I never know what to say. A lot of people say these things to protect themselves, like if they admit it first, it hurts less. But it often puts pressure on the other person to manage your discomfort. It also makes you feel smaller in your own mind. You do not need to announce your fear. You need to carry yourself through it a little more gently. Let's go deeper into one of the most important mindset shifts. Starting a conversation is not about proving your value, it's about offering a moment. When you treat it like proof, every response feels like a verdict. When you treat it like an offer, responses feel like information. This person is open. This person is distracted. This timing is good. This setting is not. That mindset protects your confidence because it keeps you from personalizing every social result. Think about two different internal stories. Story 1 is, I have to say something good or this will be embarrassing. Story 2 is, I'm just opening a normal moment and seeing where it goes. Those two stories create very different energy. The first one makes you tight and self-conscious. The second one makes you more flexible. Most conversational confidence is really just flexibility in disguise, the ability to begin without demanding a perfect outcome. Another thing that helps a lot is preparation, but not the kind most people think. You do not need memorized scripts for every situation. You do need a few reliable categories of openings so you're not starting from zero every time. For example, you can always use observations. You can always use shared circumstances. You can always use light questions about the current setting. You can always use gentle humor if that fits your style. You can always use follow-up from something previously mentioned. If you've seen someone before, you can say, how did that presentation end up going? Or did you ever hear back about that apartment? People love when you remember details. It instantly makes the interaction feel less random and more human. If you want a very practical habit, start collecting low-pressure opening lines that fit your real life, not cheesy lines, real ones. For work, it might be, how's your day going? How did that project turn out? Are you on this meeting too? I feel like this week's been nonstop. For social events, it might be, how do you know them? Have you been here before? What do you usually get here? For everyday places, it might be, that order looks better than what I picked. Do you know if they always take this long? I think everybody had the same idea today. The point is not to sound rehearsed. The point is to reduce the blankness that creates anxiety. And here's a surprising truth. You do not need to eliminate awkwardness to become socially confident. You just need to stop treating awkwardness like an emergency. That changes everything. Because even confident people have imperfect moments. They say something slightly off. They misread timing. A joke doesn't land. Someone doesn't respond much. There's a weird pause. The difference is they recover without collapsing. They don't turn one mildly weird second into a full identity crisis. Social confidence is not smoothness, it's recovery. So what do you do if a start feels awkward? First, don't overreact internally. Second, simplify. If you asked something and the energy feels off, you can respond normally and move on. If you made a light comment and it didn't land, you don't have to rescue it. You can let the moment settle. Maybe you return to what you were doing. Maybe you smile and shift naturally. The ability to not chase repair is powerful. Ironically, trying too hard to fix awkwardness often creates more of it. For example, imagine you say, this line is moving at the speed of a sad documentary, and the other person just gives a polite smile. That's okay. You don't need to explain the joke or immediately say 3 more things. Just let it go. Or imagine you ask, how do you know the host? And they say, college, in a short tone. You can say, nice, and relax. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe later the conversation picks up. Maybe not. Your worth is not hanging on this.
Now let's talk about the emotional side of this for a minute. A lot of awkwardness is not just lack of skill, it's fear of being seen. Because the moment you start a conversation, you are visible. You are choosing contact. You are risking that the other person may not fully meet you there. That can feel especially hard if you're used to playing it safe, being the quiet one, or protecting yourself by staying in the background. But there is a cost to always waiting. You end up lonely in crowded spaces. You become dependent on more outgoing people to create your social life. And you may start believing that connection belongs more naturally to other people than to you. It doesn't. It belongs to you too. That's why this skill is bigger than it looks. It's not just about talking more, it's about permitting yourself to take up a little more space in ordinary life. To be the one who says hi first, the one who asks the question, the one who turns a silent elevator ride into a light moment, the one who speaks before a meeting starts, the one who doesn't wait for friendship, romance, opportunity, or belonging to come find them by accident. Every conversation starts with someone tolerating a tiny amount of uncertainty. That can be you.
One of the best ways to build this skill is by lowering the stakes of your practice. Don't only practice in situations that feel emotionally loaded, like when you're attracted to someone or trying to impress a boss. Practice in small daily moments where the outcome doesn't matter much. Say a sentence to the cashier. Ask a barista how their morning is going. Make one comment in the office kitchen. Say something brief in the waiting room. Ask one person at a gathering how they know the host. These tiny reps matter because they teach your nervous system that opening a social moment is survivable, and that matters more than reading 10 tips and never using them. There's another piece people often miss. Starting conversations gets easier when your body is calmer. That may sound obvious, but it matters. If you rush into a moment while holding your breath, shoulders tight, face tense, and thoughts spinning, even simple words feel hard. So before you speak, try something small. Exhale. Drop your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Let your face soften. This sounds basic, but it changes your delivery. Your body is part of your communication. People don't only hear your words, they feel your nervous system. Also, stop waiting to feel fully confident before you begin. That feeling often comes after the action, not before it. So many people say, "I'll talk more when I'm more confident," but confidence is built through repetitions of doing the thing while slightly uncomfortable and seeing that nothing terrible happens. If you keep waiting for social fear to disappear first, you may wait forever. Start a little sooner than feels natural. Not recklessly, just slightly sooner, before your mind can turn one sentence into a courtroom trial. Now let's deal with a very common belief. I'm not a small talk person. Sometimes that's true in the sense that you prefer deeper conversation. That's fine. But a lot of people use that sentence to hide fear. Small talk is not beneath you. It is simply the bridge to deeper interaction. Most meaningful conversations don't begin as meaningful conversations. They begin as ordinary contact. If you want friendship, respect, dating, collaboration, community, and ease in daily life, you need to get comfortable walking across that bridge. And for introverts especially, this is important. You do not need to become more extroverted. You do not need to talk constantly. You do not need to enjoy every social setting. But you do benefit from knowing how to begin without turning it into a big event in your head. Quiet confidence is extremely attractive and effective. In fact, many people trust it more than loud confidence. Quiet confidence sounds like simple, direct, grounded speech. Not too much, not too little, just enough. It's someone who can begin without apologizing for their own presence. Let's look at a more detailed example. Say you're in the office kitchen and someone you've seen many times walks in. You've exchanged maybe one smile before. For weeks, maybe months, you've thought, I should say something sometime. This is one of those weirdly hard situations because familiarity without conversation creates pressure over time. So what do? You don't try to make up for months of silence with a perfect opening. You keep it incredibly normal. Hey, I feel like we're always in here at the same time and I've never properly said hi. I'm Alex. That works because it names the truth simply, not too serious, not too self-conscious. Or even easier, I think we've crossed paths a bunch and never actually met. I'm Alex. Then let the other person respond. That is clean, adult, and confident. Here's another example. You're at a social event and everyone seems to already have someone to talk to. You feel that familiar wave of self-consciousness. Instead of standing there waiting for an opening that feels perfect, look for one person who is also between moments. Maybe they are looking around, pouring a drink, or standing slightly outside a group. You walk over and say, "Hey, how do you know them?" That is enough. If they answer warmly, you can follow with, "Nice, I'm a friend from work," or whatever is true. Then maybe, "Have you known them long?" See how simple that is? You are not trying to dazzle anyone, you are just putting a foot on the bridge.
Sometimes the best starter is not a question at all. This is helpful for people who get tired of feeling like they have to keep the other person talking. You can use a statement that gives them room to engage. "This place is louder than I expected. That was a long meeting for something that could have been an email. I feel like everybody's running on caffeine today. This weather can't decide what it's doing." These kinds of lines feel casual because they mirror how real people often connect. Then, if they respond, you follow the thread. There's also value in learning when not to start. This sounds obvious, but it builds trust in your own judgment. If someone has earbuds in, is typing furiously, is visibly upset, is rushing, or is giving clear, closed-off signals, that may not be the moment. Social confidence includes reading context. You're not trying to talk at every opportunity. You're learning how to recognize openings that are actually openings. That makes you feel less needy and more tuned in. At the same time, be careful not to use reading the room as an excuse for constant avoidance. A lot of anxious people think they are being respectful when really they are assuming rejection in advance. They tell themselves they probably don't want to talk, when there is little actual evidence. So try to base your decision on real signals, not fear disguised as intuition. Another most people do this wrong moment is thinking they need to become more interesting to start better conversations. In reality, most people need to become more interested. Interested energy is magnetic. If you are genuinely curious, present, and responsive, you don't need to be the most entertaining person in the room. Ask better follow-up questions, notice details, react honestly, share small, relevant pieces of yourself. That creates more connection than trying to sound impressive. For example, if someone says they just got back from visiting family, instead of saying, "Oh, nice," and panicking for the next topic, you can say, "How was that? Fun or exhausting?" That question works because it gives emotional choices, not just factual ones. Or if someone says they're changing jobs, instead of "What company?" right away, you can ask, "Was that something you'd been wanting for a while?" Suddenly the conversation has life, not because you were flashy, but because you went one layer deeper in a human way. If you struggle with awkwardness, another useful thing is to stop measuring yourself against socially effortless people. Some people appear naturally smooth because of personality, experience, upbringing, or just how they're wired. That doesn't mean they're better than you. It means their starting point is different. Your job is not to become their version of social. Your job is to become more relaxed and effective in your own style. Maybe your style is calm, thoughtful, dryly funny, observant, warm, understated. Great, use that. Forced imitation always feels worse than natural development. And please remember, every good conversationalist you admire has had awkward moments. They have said too much, too little, something clumsy, something mistimed. They have been ignored. They have had blank moments. They have felt self-conscious. The difference is, they didn't build a permanent story around those moments. They kept going. Social confidence grows when you stop collecting evidence against yourself. Sometimes people ask, what if I start a conversation and then my mind goes blank? First, that happens to almost everybody at some point. Second, Blankness gets worse when you treat it like disaster. If your mind goes blank, you can go simple. Return to the environment. Return to what they just said. Return to a basic question. Or even let the moment breathe and say, I completely lost my train of thought for a second. In the right tone, that is not embarrassing. It's human. Often the other person relaxes more because now the moment is real. Here's another thing that works surprisingly well. Use transitions instead of pressure. If a conversation begins but you're not sure how to continue, you don't need a giant leap. You can say, so what's your connection here? What's your role on the team? How's your week been? What do you usually do after work? These aren't magical, but they help the conversation move one step. One step is enough. Most social ease is built one step at a time.
Let's also talk about texting and digital life for a moment, because a lot of people are now more comfortable behind a screen than in person, and that affects confidence. When you get used to editing your words, rereading them, deleting them, and controlling your timing, real conversations can feel much riskier. There's no backspace in live interaction. That's one reason people feel awkward. They're trying to achieve text-level control in a real-time human moment. You can't. Real conversation is messier. That is not a flaw. That is the medium. Once you stop expecting polished perfection, the pressure drops. And if you've had experiences where people were rude, dismissive, or hard to read, it's understandable that your brain wants to protect you. But don't let a few bad social moments teach you a rule that the world is closed to you. Some people are tired. Some are distracted. Some are socially clumsy themselves. Some are not your people. But many people are more open than you think, especially when the interaction feels easy and respectful. You don't need universal success. You need enough moments of connection to remind yourself that beginning is worth it. So let's put this all together in a way you can actually use. When the moment comes, don't search for brilliance. Notice what's true. Say one simple thing. Let it be enough. If they respond, stay with the thread instead of rushing to impress. React like a person. Share a little, ask a little. Don't over-control. If the moment stays light, let it stay light. If it grows, let it grow. If it doesn't, that's okay too. You still practiced the skill that matters most. You began. Maybe the biggest truth here is that awkwardness is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes it's just the feeling of growth while you're learning a new social pattern. If you've spent years staying silent, of course speaking sooner will feel strange at first. If you've spent years overthinking every interaction, of course being more direct will feel unfamiliar. Unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It often means you are finally doing something different. And over time, something really nice happens. The moments that used to feel high stakes start feeling normal. You stop worshiping the perfect opening. You stop treating silence like a threat. You stop reading every response like a judgment. You trust yourself more, not because every conversation goes perfectly, but because you know you can handle yourself. That is real confidence. Calm, steady, not dramatic. The kind that helps you in meetings, friendships, dating, networking, everyday errands, and random life moments you can't predict. So the next time you're standing there and you feel that familiar hesitation, I want you to remember this. You do not need to become a different person to start conversations well. You do not need a smoother personality, a louder voice, a more impressive life, or a perfect line. You need less pressure, more presence, and a willingness to be human first. The conversation does not begin when you finally become flawless. It begins when you stop demanding flawlessness from yourself. Start smaller than your fear wants. Start simpler than your mind wants. Let the moment be ordinary. That's where most good conversations begin anyway. Not in perfect confidence, not in polished charm. In one normal sentence said with calm energy, in one small opening, in one decision not to hide. And if this is something you've struggled with for a long time, be patient with yourself. Social ease is not built in one dramatic breakthrough. It is built in dozens of ordinary moments where you choose contact over avoidance, presence over performance, and curiosity over self-judgment. That kind of change may look small from the outside, but inside, it can completely reshape how you move through the world. You deserve to feel more comfortable in rooms, in meetings, on dates, at gatherings, in everyday public spaces, and in all those in-between moments where life quietly happens. You deserve to stop standing on the edge of connection waiting for someone else to make it safe. You can make it safe enough, one sentence at a time. So the next time you feel awkward, don't ask, "How do I stop being awkward forever?" Ask, "What is one easy human thing I can say right now?" That question will take you much further, and the more often you answer it, the more natural this becomes. If this helped you feel a little more understood and a little more capable, stay with me here, because this is the kind of skill that gets stronger every time you hear it in a new way and use it in real life. And if you want more support with speaking calmly, connecting naturally, and feeling more confident in everyday conversations, you already know where to find me.
Please subscribe.